a sport bike. This does not matter. We're going to talk about the differences between riding on a sporty type bike and riding like a long wheelbase cruiser type bike. Because there are differences. Techniques aren't really different, but there are differences. So what's the first thing you see when you see this about what's in the picture? What's happening to the motorcycle? Right. See that pitch? That's important to recognize. And we know about this. It's in the car. You hit the brakes hard, your coffee goes spilling all over your dash. So loading that front tire is a big part of what we need to understand when it comes to getting our bike stopped quickly. So that's only one thing we're going to be talking about. There are other nuances that you probably have not really even considered. Before we get any farther, though, let's do this. So this is so that you get an idea of pictorial resume of mine. That you can kind of get a look and see, what I've done, what I'm doing. I wrote for Motorcyclist magazine for 4 years, Motorcycle Consumer News for 14 years, writing the skills and safety column. This is my wife and my daughter. So we are all been riding a long time together. This is me. I was testing motorcycles for motorcyclists for a little while. One of my books, I got it here. The other book's over there. I was an MSF instructor, teaching beginners for 25 years. And then there's my website. And I also run track days and also was an instructor and still am a track day instructor.
You need a picture of you and yes.
Oh, maybe I'll show you the video later.
I saw it.
Did you? Okay, braking. This is what we're going to cover. So just basically, there's a lot to cover, but we're going to focus a little bit on just the dynamics of the motorcycle, and then how you make it so that your inputs are going to give you the results that you're expecting, that you need. And that's going to be separating out the front brake and the rear brake, and we'll talk about link brakes, we'll talk about ABS and all that as we go. But I'm separating out the front brake and the rear brake because they actually have different purposes. And then the timing and intensity, we'll talk about that. And then trail braking, I want to talk about. We talked about this last week, those of you how many of you were here last week? Yeah, great, excellent. So we're going to get into that even maybe a little bit deeper than we did last weekend. And then I'm just going to enforce the fact that you guys have to practice. You being here is awesome. Your loved ones are thanking you for coming here because you'll then be a safer rider. You'll be able to manage whatever you have to out there. So I commend you for that. But you're not going to be a better rider after today because with the knowledge, that's great. But you're only a better rider if you can apply the knowledge. Okay? That's up to you. I can only kind of convey. Even when you come to me and we do a street training or a parking lot training or even on the track, it's up to you. I can only introduce you to techniques. You're not going to master them with me. You might. There's some people that get that and go from here to here. But it's not likely. It's that I'm going to introduce you to make sure you've got the right technique and you're practicing the right things. So practice is great, but you've got to practice the right things. You can practice yourself into a real bad habit pretty quick. All right. So my job here today is going to get you to go, I didn't know that. I'm going to try that next time I'm on my bike. That's what's going to make it work. Okay? All right. Ooh, anybody been in this position before? Wow. Right? Looking over your shoulder, looking at something else, and the cars are all stopped in front of you. Right. So, what's it?
I left the straight mark, I left the zigzag.
Okay, and that's what happens sometimes. You get the fishtail thing going on. First thing I see when I see this is I see a huge mistake. Besides the fact that she wasn't paying attention and it caught her by surprise. That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. All these things I'm talking about like advanced skills, is when you are advanced, your skills are like way up here, like as high as you could possibly be. The best riders train to that level and then never need to use those skills. But they know they have to keep them sharp. Okay? But it's your ability to see a situation, to manage situations, to have strategies to manage those situations that keep you from needing to use your extremely excellent emergency braking skills. You follow me? So that sort of thing can be dangerous because you could be trained way up to here and then get complacent because every ride you take, you're not in this situation every ride. So you kind of think, I'm good, I'm all set. Those skills are perishable though, right? When you start, the beginning of a season, you're a little rusty, you kind of need to kind of get up to speed. Well, these sort of emergency skills, like this, there's no thinking. When a deer comes out in front of you, there's no thinking. It's only going to be what you've trained to do. It's going to be muscle memory. So, and you get on a new bike, you have to train to that bike too, okay? Because it's always going to be a little different. Because the muscle memory is going to be from no brakes to maximum brakes in as quickly as you possibly can. Can you do that without skidding? ABS helps us with that, but you want to be able to, without thinking, be able to just do it. And then afterwards you're like, oh, Jesus, take the wheel. I didn't do anything, What happened is your muscles just took over, and they just did it. Now, you can train to do really well, or you can not train, and then good luck with that. Because we actually have to train ourselves to undo things that come to us naturally. Anybody ever heard of target fixation? So, there's something bad happening in front of you. Mm-hmm. Human nature is to target your vision on that. Well, that's a bad thing to do, because it will draw you right to it. Same thing as when we panic, what do we do with our controls?
Grab.
We grab it. It's a startle. It's if I come up to you and I, poke you in the sides, you're going to startle. It's the same thing. You have to untrain yourself out of that. You have to train yourself out of that natural response. Okay? So that's your job. Right? My job is I'm going to be sort of introducing the importance of this and then talking about the specifics. So first thing here is skidding is bad. Avoid skidding at all costs. Because this actually will make your stopping distance greater. A sliding tire has less grip than a rolling tire. Okay? So you want to use your brakes to a point where it's at impending skid, which is what ABS does. It puts it at impending skid. Okay? But once you skid, fishtail, and the bike's sliding, it's melting the rubber. It's just like, shoot, might as well be on ice. So the idea that skidding is the way to stop is like, that's terrible thinking. So the other thing about this is that it's likely this was a rear tire skid. If it was a front tire skid, what would this bike have looked like? It would have been on the side. You skid your front tire, and it tucks, and you're on the ground. Within, really very, very quick, depending on, the actual circumstances. So if you skid the front tire, get off that brake. Otherwise, you're going to tuck. Of course, you're going to probably hit the thing you're trying to avoid. So if you can hurry up and get back on the brakes, great. But again, you've already exceeded the time frame to actually get the bike stopped. The importance of training. All right, so I'm just bringing that back. So why would somebody skid the rear tire? What is the dynamics and the thinking behind why people do this? Untrained riders do this. Yeah.
Pulling your front tire, you unload your rear tire and you'll overbrake it.
Good. So we're going to talk about loads. So that's exactly right. When you brake, you saw that first that photograph where the bike loads the front tire, the suspension compresses. Well, that unloads the rear tire and makes it really easy to skid. Okay, so that's the dynamic answer to that question. What's another reason that this is the most common thing that happens with untrained riders?
Panic.
Panic. Okay, but why is it the rear brake that's
They only hit the
skidding?
rear brake.
What's that?
Maybe they only hit the rear brake.
Maybe. That's
Or
really
they
common.
downshifted too much and went down too fast.
Say again?
They downshifted too much.
Could be. In an
Yes.
emergency, it's unlikely that she was even going for the downshift. But we're going to talk about engine braking. So that it could happen, for sure. It's just she's a car driver. We don't have a handbrake in the car. She's not trained herself out of being a car driver and to be a motorcycle rider. Another thing, look at the big old rear pedals on these bikes. Look at the muscle you have here in your leg. All those things combine to overbrake. You have to train yourself out of that. Okay? When you practice your emergency braking, let's say you don't have ABS, and you come down the parking lot to me, and I'm like calling you, you're going to do a quick stop, and you come to that stop and your rear tire is skidding. Okay, front brake is good, but I'm going to say, all right, ease up on that rear brake so that we don't get the skid, right? And then you go back, you do it again, you skid again, you go back, it gets better. Third time, all right, now you're not skidding, that's good. But now you're being too light on the rear brake. Give us a little bit more brake pressure. You see, we're really looking for, on that bike, on the bike you're on, finding that impending point. That's what's going to give you that the shortest stopping distance and staying in control. Okay, she's a car driver. All she knows is rear brake braking. Okay, and the other thing I oftentimes hear is, well, my bike has linked brakes, so I only use the rear brake. Well, that's a problem because the brake systems are they're linked in a way that's like if you use only the rear brake, you're never fully using all the front brake. And vice versa, but that's the one that a lot of people just be lazy and they'll use just the rear brake. Well, first off, it's just terrible technique. You're not utilizing the whole, the tools that your bike have on offer. So you want to still use the same technique that we'll be talking about, even if you have linked brakes. Same with ABS, and we'll talk a bit about that too. All right, so this is, you've probably seen diagrams like this, which is how much space it takes to get your motorcycle stopped at 20 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour, and 60 miles per hour. So it's exponentially added on to your distance by your speed. So knowing that, when you are approaching an intersection, because we know intersections are where we have the most trouble, with colliding with cars, because it's an intersection. You approach an intersection, and I see people doing it all the time, like say the light's about to turn yellow, or it turns yellow, you gas it into an intersection. It's a bad idea. I've done it, believe me. It's something that's like, I can make, and then you realize afterwards, like, holy, I just accelerated into an intersection. That's insanity, okay? So the difference between 20 miles per hour and 30 miles per hour is significant, seriously significant, all right? 60 is like really off the charts. But we ride 60 miles an hour all the time. If you do it out here, though, and somebody pulls out, there's no way. I mean, that's a strategy thing. This is where if you think bad choices, I can't teach good judgment. Try. Can't do it. That's on you guys. You have to know when the environment and the situation is going to, that there's a likelihood that if somebody were to pull out, that I would not be able to stop in time. Don't put yourself in that situation. Now, it doesn't mean you have to crawl around at 20 miles per hour all the time. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to read the road. You have to read the situation and know when it's okay to pick up your speed and know when it's time to, as you approach, say, an intersection, you're going to go in slower and you're going to do what with your brakes to reduce your reaction time. Cover your brakes. Not only does covering your brakes make it so that you don't have to take that time to reach. That's 30 feet, by the way, at about, at certainly at 50 miles an hour. So you're already covering your brakes. 2 fingers, it's good, because you still want control of your throttle. It's not likely you're going to need it, but you're ready. Your foot's near the brake pedal. It also, when you do that, it's telling your body and your mind that you're ready. Your hands are off. The opposite is if your hands are off, you're up on your highway pegs, and you're like this. I'm not ready. I'm not ready at all. Something happens and suddenly, now I got to get in position. Too late. Too late. Okay? When you're riding through traffic and through intersections, particularly, you shouldn't be on your highway pegs. You've got to be ready. Okay? Get through the intersection, you're all set. There's going to be another intersection maybe, but let's say once you're out of town, it's fine. Deer are going to happen. That's the sort of thing, the sort of strategies you need for managing hazards that are likely to happen in a particular area or time of day. That's something you always have to keep in mind. When I ride at night, I'm covering my brake. The whole time. I mean, my 2 fingers are okay, so I don't get cramped up. I'm just resting there. But I need to reduce that reaction time. Okay. All right, let's talk about load transfer, only because this starts talking about the importance of the front brake. So we saw the photo. Now here it is again. It's in black and white, but you can see that load transfer as we brake, that it's increased in the front and decreased load in the rear. So increased load is basically like pressing your hand into the surface of a table, right? First off, if I just rest my hand on it and I rub it, no problem, right? If I put a little bit of load on it, now I can't slide it. So it's no different than that. So there's mechanical grip, which is basically the rubber keying with the pavement texture. So softer rubber, that's why race tires are so soft, is because they can key into that, the nuance, the nooks and crannies of the pavement. Now you load that, and now it's squishing in there real good. And also there's chemical adhesion as well. But for our purpose, let's just keep it simple. So loading the front tire is your friend, okay? However, if I were to I can't really do it on so I don't have a good surface, but if I were to load like this and just press like that, that's good. If I were to go like that, that's bad. I would skid, I would slide. You have to load the tire before you can then work the tire. This guy, Nick Ionash, who runs the Yamaha school, that's what he'll use. So load the tire before you work the tire. I don't want that to be poor. Hey Nick, if you're there, that's on you. That's yours. I'm not taking it. Load the tire. So how would you load a tire?
Progressively hitting the front brake.
Because as you brake, where does the load go? Where does your coffee go if you hit it too hard? Forward. You just loaded your front tire. So you're doing it every time you brake. You're doing it every time you decelerate, just less so. Okay? You're taking braking force will load the tire. But again, what I want to reinforce is that it has to be loaded progressively. Well, what about when it's an emergency? Well, that's where ABS comes in. The best advice when it comes to an emergency and you have ABS is just go for it. Just let it rip. Every bit you can give it, just give it right away. Okay? However, I will say that, let's say we're riding in the rain. If you just grab the front brake really, really fast, I'm talking panicky grab, the ABS is going to kick in immediately. Okay? Your stopping distance will be much greater with your ABS on. Now, modern ABS is really good. So again, the advice really is sound to say that just go for it and let the technology kind of, manage it. But if you can take that half a second and load it and then squeeze, you've now loaded the front tire. Now it won't go immediately to the ABS. Now you've got a good impending skid type stop. Yeah.
Will applying the rear brake load the front wheel?
It does. Like engine braking would, but obviously not as much, because the rear brake, if you think about the dynamics, it's going to pull from the back. If this is the front of my bike, my fingers, and this is the back, it's going to only pull from here, as opposed to the front where it's going to, contact point here. It's going to load this tire much more than if you just have your braking point.
Brake to the rear first?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. That's an excellent question. I'll hit it now because you brought it up. There's a nuance to braking that if you were to, it's a controlled brake, not emergency, right? When I'm working with students on the street, we have communicators, so I'm chatting, I'm coaching as we ride. If we're coming to a stop sign at the bottom of the hill, and this is just works with flat areas either, but it's just more the result is more dramatic when it's a downhill and you have to come to a stop at the downhill. If you were to just use the front brake only, let's just use that, it's going to pitch, right? And you're downhill already, and it's really, now you got a lot of load on that front tire. Suspension's compressed a lot, and the rear is really light. Now, if you were to apply the rear brake first, it actually squats the bike a little bit. I'm talking rear, front, okay? Rear, front. So it's rear, squat, front. And now you'll notice that it doesn't pitch like that. It'll still pitch because it's downhill and you're braking, but it kind of just takes that rear of the bike and it just sort of connects it to the ground. Okay. All right. These are the sort of things that, again, I work with people like you guys, who've ridden 40 years. People that have ridden longer than I have, and they're like, do this. I'm like, oh my. that's amazing. You know, will you notice it right away? You may or may not. Depends on whether you get the timing right and all that. It's subtle, but once you really pay attention to it, you're really controlling the bike at a really high level now. One thing I want to point out here is this is a sport bike, and this is talking about the tendency, the looping tendency. Now look at this angle here. If you're on a sporty bike with a short wheelbase, your tendency to loop, and I mean like an endo kind of thing, or a stoppie, which is what this guy's doing, see? That's much more likely than if you're on a long wheelbase cruiser, because the wheelbase relative to the center of gravity allows this angle to be much less steep. Compare that to that, right? What does that say about your rear brake? Let me back up. I didn't explain this quite well. If you, the front brake is your power brake. Okay, we determined about load. You brake, you load that front tire. That's why there's big brakes on the front. Let's talk about sport bikes particularly. 2 big brakes on the front rotors. On the rear, there's this little tiny disc. Okay. Now with cruisers, though, the discs are about the same size. Why is that?
More load on the back.
Compared to a sport bike, yes.
Like heavy.
Relatively more load on the rear. Not only the weight, it's that concentration of the wheel base relative to the low center of gravity. Okay, you put a passenger on the back of a bike, and now your rear brake really comes into play. So it's the same kind of thing. That applies to whatever bike you're on.
Having some trouble hearing you. Can you ask those people to back down a little?
Yeah, guys. Sorry, these guys are having a hard time. Here.
Thank you.
Good, I didn't know. So.
Joe, you want to get that?
You guys there just went over to the That's great. So, okay. So again, the photos. Again, this is the sort of thing, smoke off the rear tire. That's applying too much rear brake relative to the load that you're putting on the front. I mean, the front is loading. It's not very compressed here. This rider here, if they came by, I'd probably tell them more front brake, less rear brake. Okay. Comes to this, now we're in the rain. Passenger, look at all the load back here. Now you almost are going to be like pretty close to, not 50-50 still, because you're still going to, when you brake, it's going to load the front tire. It's going to pitch forward. But the rear's now, it's so loaded that it's really going to be a hard time, getting it off the ground. That's where your rear brake starts to come in and is more, proportionally more important. Okay. In the rain in general, your rear brake becomes a little more important because you don't brake so hard. Follow me? You see the nuances? This is like, when you think about it, it's like, oh yeah, it makes sense. Never thought about it. Well, now hopefully you will. Riding in the rain, I just wrote an article for Revzilla, their Common Tread magazine, blog, and we talked about, and it's about rain riding. And that's the sort of thing is that in the rain, you still have maybe 70, 80, even 80% of the same grip as you have in the drive. But that loading has to happen more deliberately. So you grab the brake in the rain, you're going to go immediately to the ABS, and the ABS can't even sometimes manage, a really, really slick situation like that. And you could slide sideways. The importance of loading can't be overemphasized. The rain is an example of where it really starts to come into high importance. I'll say also on the racetrack, when I'm doing crazy speeds and I'm leaned over all the way, and if I don't load tires like one finger type loading, I'm going to lose traction. So because the brakes are powerful enough. So loading is just really important. So when you think about your traction, I want you to think about developing a sense, a traction sense. And that comes from you've got all these proprioceptive nerves and stuff that really give you a sense of where you are in space. It also gives you a sense of, just through vibration, whether the traction is actually there or not. But you have to really pay attention to that. It's a language most people don't ever learn. But it's there, you know. Anybody have, so, front brake, we've kind of covered this. You can see here is another example, just the load. Look at that, he's almost bottomed out here. That's how you would stop. That's a good stop. No skidding, right? That would be probably the ideal right there. Okay. You may have a question like, wasn't he on the edge of like flipping over? Right? No? You don't have that question? Most people kind of think, oh, I don't want to use the front brake because I'm going to flip over the handlebars. It's just not going to happen. Especially on bikes like this. You don't have the looping. It's like, how do we even know if he's going to it? Maybe downhill, steep downhill, you grab the front brake, and, you know. But I don't even think you can do it. But on bikes like this, short wheelbase, yeah, you can do a stoppie. You've probably seen some of the racers who do that sort of thing, stoppie. But it's actually really hard to even do on a sport bike. There's a technique to do it. So that doesn't mean that in a panicky situation you got a lot of grip and you got on the brakes really good, you didn't skid. You could get the bike on off the rear wheel. And all the weight that goes forward, it could cause you to do it. It's possible. Don't think about it though, because the likelihood of it happening, it's more likely you're going to skid the front tire first and tuck and fall down. So. Okay, front brake, let's talk a little bit more. The rear brake, we already talked about the front. Rear brake, we talked about in that your job with the rear brake is to control it and to know when it's useful. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So the rear brake, which also includes engine braking, by the way, so it's rear wheel braking, is actually a stabilizing force. So not only does it allow you to stop in a shorter distance because you've got two brakes, right? So why not use them both? Now, yes, most of your brake force is in the front. Some will say as much as like 80% compared to 20% in the rear, but you're giving up 20% in the rear if you don't use your rear brake. That's quite a bit. So you want to use both brakes. If you're link brakes, you are using both brakes, but not really in that they're proportional. So use the front brake only. You're going to get all front brake, but only a little bit of it. Right? So, which is pretty good. The reason they do it is because riders are lazy and they don't train. That's why they do it. You figure, well, safer if we just let the bike do technology do some of the skill work, but you can do better than that. So when it comes though to braking with using the rear brake, we talked about how you can use it to keep the bike squatted and not nosing up on a downhill stop. When it comes to coming to a stop, it will keep the rear tire in line with the front tire if it has some pull. And that's your rear brake at the contact patch, right? So the idea of fishtailing is you have no control. That rear tire is skidding. You have no traction there. That's why it's fishtail. When you've got the rear tire that's not skidding, it literally keeps the bike stable, keeps it straight. Okay? So another reason why when you come to a stop, use the rear brake first. It gives you that stabilizing force, and then you can use the front. Squats, and it keeps the bike in motion. That's what this is sort of showing, center of gravity. So this, being the brake force, is going to recenter it. When it fishtails, it's actually recentering, but then it's going the other way, right? So it's swinging like a pendulum. Here's recentering, but it's not going to come in here and stop. You wouldn't want it to, actually, because that would high side you. Which brings up another thing let's talk about, is excuse me, the MSF, the basic rider course, they'll say that if you skid the rear tire, keep it skidding, and then just steer through the fishtail. Okay, but and the reason why is because if you're fishtailing out like this, and then you let go of the rear brake, and it regains traction, it flips you here, and your rear tire immediately comes back in line with the front, and it sends you off the bike. You can't hold on. That's a high side. Okay. Can you release the brake with a fishtail? Maybe. I mean, I've done it. On off-road, I do it. On low traction situations, you definitely can, like in the gravel. It's not going to hit, it's not going to immediately grip because it's not great grip to begin with. But I've done it on pavement where it's kind of skid a little bit and I've eased off the rear brake. I didn't let go of it, but I eased off of it and it kind of timed it enough that it was okay, and it kind of wiggled me a little bit and I was able to keep going. But just want to throw that out.
I did done it when I was brand new and I hit the wrong gear, so I was coming to a stop and I, kind of downshifted too much.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. When it comes to gear shifting, people say, well, what gear should I be in? The answer is the right gear, which is the gear that you're not over-revving, you're not so lugging that you can't get the power going. So when it comes to downshifting, you always slow before you downshift. Don't have your downshifts be your stopping or slowing tool. Can they scrub off a few miles per hour? Absolutely. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you need to get the bike stopped, you don't use your engine braking to do that. It's an aid, but it's your brakes. And then your job is just to get the bike into first gear so that you can go after your stop and you keep going again. So when it comes to gear shifting, just have it match the road speed. If you end up downshifting one too many and let that clutch out, it could stall, but when you've got the momentum, it's more likely that it's going to lose traction. Okay? So always smooth, even with your clutch. I'm talking about squeezing the front brake to load the tire. Same with your clutch. Ease out your clutch so that, again, you're trying to manage traction. I do a whole traction management seminar, too. So you can
Another day.
Yeah, it's another day.
The thing to learn when you're a newbie, though.
What did you learn? After you did that, did you say to yourself,
Pay more attention to my gears. I hit it without counting down, so I went one more than I should have, slowing down.
okay, so you answered the question, you have a strategy for letting that not happen again. Count your gears. Okay, that works. I would suggest that instead of counting your gears, because I lose count of that, it's like, it's the right gear, this is the motor.
Yeah.
Okay, so not only are the brakes for slowing and stopping, but they're also for control and direction control. We're going to talk about that when it comes to trail braking. So trail braking, if you were in my seminar last Saturday, you know what this is. For those of you who weren't there, trail braking, you probably at this point, you've probably heard of it. That's likely. There was 5 years ago, people were like, I've never heard that term ever. Now it's sort of used and people are using it. What it is instead of doing what the MSF, the basic course says and teaches, is you brake straight, you get off the brakes before you turn. That's what they teach. That's incorrect. I understand why they do it, because beginners can't manage things. So let's keep it simple. That's fine. But it kind of does a disservice in that as soon as they get out on the road, you're going to have to trail brake. There are times when you're just going to have to do it. You probably do it already, you just don't do it consciously, therefore you are at risk of doing it poorly and then losing traction. Okay. What is it? It's braking into a corner. That's pretty much it. Instead of, I'm not talking about braking in a corner. That you got into the corner too high, and then you have to save your ass, right? That's braking in a corner. That's not what trail braking is. We're going to talk about braking in a corner for an emergency, but this is where it's a planned technique. You know that you're coming into a corner and you understand the benefits of it, which we're about to talk about, and you're going to plan to do it. It's the type of corner that's perfect for trail braking, and then you apply it. Okay, so what is it? First of all, I want to show you two-finger braking. Talk about that. Most modern bikes now, you can get the power you need, particularly with just basic cornering, with just two fingers. And that gives you the other fingers to be able to manage your throttle. Okay. If you're on a vintage bike, you may need all four fingers. I get that. So this is riding the Alps, which I'm lucky to be able to do several times. The Alps have these steep hairpins, steep downhill. Mount Greylock. I bring my students to Mount Greylock for this very reason, for trail braking practice. First of all, let's look at conventional braking. So this is what the MSF teaches. The red is stopping, is braking. The transition here is kind of coasting. Coasting's not good. The bike doesn't like coasting. You are getting some engine braking, but it's kind of vague. It's like, it doesn't know what you're doing. It likes to either have force, a stopping force, or a going force. You've got to be a good dance partner, right? If you're dancing, I love using that term. If you're dancing and you're kind of like, I'm not sure, like your dance partner, or going left or right, you know? It's like, that's no good. You're gonna have the pressure on the dance partner to like already be guiding them if they know what the next move is gonna be. The bike is kind of the same way. So look at this, look at the colored lines here, and compare it to this. That's it. See how the red line goes deeper? It's the conventional. That. And you see how the orange transition is much smaller. It actually doesn't even go to yellow. It's almost a slight overlap. That's again a thing you can do with the two fingers. You can slightly overlap your transition. We do that on the track all the time because I can't afford to, if I'm braking and I'm on, all the way over, leaned over, if I were to just let go of the front brake and it rebounds, I'd lose the front, right? So I always am transitioning smoothly. Now on the street, am I all the way over, leaned over like that? No. But do I apply the same technique? Yes. Because I have other things on the street. I got wet painted arrows, I've got sand, I've got, unpredictable surfaces. I need to manage that just as skillfully.
And we're going to follow
Okay, so here's a diagram of trail rig. This is the Mohawk Trail, the famous hairpin. So we're going this way. I have another diagram that shows this as well, but I want to show you the technique. Why am I doing the downhill demonstration as opposed to an uphill demonstration?
More force going downhill.
That's right. You need to control gravity. Uphill, I can just use my throttle to slow down. But downhill, especially if I'm approaching at a pretty good speed and it's really steep, I need to use the brakes. Engine braking is not enough unless I'm like, right? That's not a good technique. Again, your brakes are your slowing tool. So if I were to come down this hill, and again, imagine it being really steep, like one of those Alps type steep hairpins. If I were to let go of the brakes the way the MSF says, what's going to happen? I'm going to speed up. And what happens to a motorcycle when it's accelerated? Does it lean more? Does it
Straightens up.
It straightens up. Now I'm straightening up at a point where I need it to actually lean more. So it's counter to what you actually want your bike to do. Okay? So that's one of the benefits of trail braking is you're controlling your direction. So at some point here, I'm using both brakes. At some point though, if I were to still use both brakes, I'd slow down maybe too much. So at this point here, I taper off the front brake, but I remain on the rear brake. And that keeps the bike tight, okay? And it controls that last like 3 miles an hour of control. That the rear brake is a weak brake, so I don't have the risk of slowing me down too much, and I can control it pretty well for that last little bit. There are times I've even actually pumped it a little bit, and just to kind of get it, so that I have it just right. Some bikes I have a Tenere 700, and the rear brake is just a little garbage. So I have to work with the bike. I work with every bike's a little different. So this is what's happening is I'm slowing. I don't want to slow anymore, so I'm tapering off the brakes. All right, but I'm still on both brakes, but lighter off on the front brake. Remember, traction management, the more I lean, the less I can brake. So as I come into a corner and I'm leaning more, I have to release the brake pressure to manage traction. Right? If I'm leaned all the way over and I just grab the brakes, I'm down. Right? So when it comes to trail braking, I'm trail braking, I'm straight up and down. 90% of the braking is done pretty much up and down. All right? So I'm braking, I'm leaning in, I'm releasing. At full lean, I'm fully off the front brake for sure. And then I'll just kind of drag that rear brake just to finish it up. And then I'm on the throttle, oftentimes against the rear brake to make the smoothest transition. Just a little bit. You may think I'm like revving the thing against the rear brake and I'm going to go through my brake pads. No, it's subtle. However, I do go through a lot of brake pads because it's technique. Just a mistake. slipped my mind. It'll come back. So the transition then is to throttle out the bike. I've minimized the amount of coasting time. We're going to talk about timing and intensity, and we can start here. If I were to get on the gas too early, same thing's going to happen. I'm going to straighten up, and I'm going to end up out here. Or what we see all the time is people starting to accelerate and leaning at the same time. That's a traction robber. Same as braking. So if you add acceleration and lean angle at the same time, that's a high side that can happen if you do it too aggressively. So you're trying to time up when you're ready to tell the bike that you're done turning and you want it to start to stand up. You do that with the throttle. If you do it too early, you're going to have to fight the bike. Stay in the corner. So you have to wait for it, be patient. But if you do this right, this transition time is relatively short. Is this making sense? Do you have any questions about this? Yeah.
So explain all this stuff with the pen. How does that change?
It doesn't. It's just, again, kind of the rear brake is a little bit more useful. No, it's really not different. Why would you think it might be?
Just because of the higher center of gravity.
No. Still, the thing what you're trying to do is use the brakes to help control the direction of travel. So you're using as much brakes as you need to slow down. To separate the idea that you're actually then can use the brakes to help control the direction of travel. Another example of that is when you're doing tight U-turns, like in a parking lot. So you're coming around a corner and you got the handlebars all the way turned and you're doing the thing, and it's a whole other course of slow speed maneuvers. I'm not going to get into the details, but you're going to make this turn, and if you use the rear brake, you can control that speed to a very high level. Why I mean that is for me to make a tight turn, the tightest turn I can, is that on my bike, 4 miles per hour. That's 3 miles per hour is a little too unstable. I can do 3.5 maybe, but if I go to 5 miles per hour, it's going to be more stable, but I'm going to go loud. So I want to stay at 4 miles per hour, not 3.5, not 4.5. So how do I do that? Do it with the throttle? Forget about it. My throttle is like a light switch. I use the clutch for sure because I'm going slower than first gear. So I'm using the clutch and I'm keeping the throttle steady. And I'm using the rear brake to refine that speed. Okay? Some people can do it with just the clutch. But the rear brake is a tool there, and it really is very effective. And using the rear brake helps to kind of hook it around. Because you're putting force on that rear brake that's contact pad. That is what you want to have it come around. What's that?
No throttle. Keep the throttle steady. Play the clutch. And work with your back brake.
There you go.
Don't
Turn your head.
No.
Turn your head.
Okay.
Yeah. Good.
Basically idle speed, right?
Yeah, a little bit more. I usually accelerate your throttle because
Yeah.
the main reason people fall over when they stall. Don't let it stall. Keep the elevation, the throttle elevated. Use the clutch to control that. All right, so back to trail braking. This I'm going uphill. This is the same corner. It just shows. Well, let me go to this other. Let's stay consistent. So here's the same corner downhill. I've got these targets here. This is talking more about the cornering line that you want to wait, and you don't want to apex here because otherwise you're going to end up out here. So if you're going to come in toward the inside, have it come around the corner. Now most people just stay in the middle of the lane. That's fine. And I'm not going to get into the seminar we did last weekend, which was talk all about corner lines. But look at the colors of the lines. That's where I want you to focus. So here's the red, here's the transition, and here's the go. Okay. So let's back up. Now we're going up. There we go. So now we're going uphill. I'm going to slow, but I'm really going to get off the brakes fairly early because gravity is going to slow me down. If I were on the brakes much longer than this, I actually might be off the brakes more like here. I would end up going too slow with gravity. I might not even, if I'm going in slow enough, I might not even use brakes because the gravity is strong enough. But I'll still use them to settle the bike. Use the brakes to kind of get everything squatted and everything loaded and not just coast into it, because that's not great. Again, the bike is sort of in limbo, and if you're just kind of off the ball and coasting it, it's fine, but try to just give it a little bit of brake pressure to sort of settle the bike, settle the suspension. Right? And then transition to the throttle. I will be on the rear brake, by the way, uphill, to keep a bike really tight. Again, any of you guys ridden in the Alps before? Any of you? Couple? So some of those corners are crazy, like they're like this, and you go up like this. Right? So I use the rear brake to keep the bike tight because I need the throttle. I'm going to stall if I'm not on the gas. So it goes back to this tight U-turn thing. I don't want to stall. That is one of the biggest reasons that people fall on those uphill haircuts. So I'm going to be on the gas, but I want to keep the bike tight. I don't want any risk of it going wide. So I'm going to be on the gas, and I'll be just tapping that rear brake or sliding, or not sliding, just sort of the pressure on the rear brake, and that keeps the bike right where I want it to be. Remember I mentioned the throttle, my throttle is jerky. If I were completely relying on the throttle, I'm now leaned over and I'm starting to be really smooth as I can. And the thing goes, whoop, at 8 miles an hour, that's going to make it 10 miles an hour, and it's going to stand you up enough that it could put you in the oncoming lane. So use the rear brake to not let the bike jerk.
Only for precision, is that what you're saying?
What's that?
Braking uphill only for precision?
Yes. So use that rear brake for precision, and especially if you've got a jerky throttle, which most bikes kind of are. Okay? Again, just sort of, let's just take a breath and go, holy cow, I didn't know there was this much to braking, So, okay, so again, uphill, let gravity do most of the work, and now I'll bring in the track day, the training day on the track, is that we work in Palmer, Mass. There's one of the best racetracks I've ever been on. And it's more like a road than it is a racetrack. It goes up through the woods, it's like this beautiful thing. But it's got a lot of elevation change. And so this is where we practice this a lot. Trail braking downhill and knowing just not over braking uphill. All right, so now we're in an emergency situation. Well, before we go, are there any questions about that? I'm kind of loading with a lot of stuff. How many of you have been in this situation before? Sure. I don't know anybody who probably hasn't. If you haven't, you will. So this is
in the freeway, you're not on a corner.
Yeah.
Lucky.
So sometimes we're in a corner, and this is actually an open corner. This person probably saw this fairly early. Keep your eyes up, make sure that you can see things early. But sometimes you're in a corner. Now, we trail brake into the corner, it's beautiful. We start to get on the gas. Let me back up a little bit. Another benefit of trail braking is that you are on the brakes while you're entering the corner. Mm-hmm. If you come into the corner and you realize there's something in the corner, you haven't fully released the brake. All you have to do is then load with a little bit of brake pressure. As opposed to you come in, you let go of the brakes, you come in, what are you going to do? Go down. Okay? So you're keeping the load on the tire so that if you have to get a little bit more brakes, all you're doing, it's not going to be a panic. It's going to be a, oh, wow, and just kind of squeeze it a little bit. And you're going to stand it up because you're going to be going slow like this guy. Okay? So you're trail braking into the corner, you come around, there's something in the road, you slow it down, but it's across the road. It's like diesel all the way across the road, whatever. You've got to stop. Or you got to get absolutely straight up and down and ride over. Okay? This is where you have to release lean angle to introduce brake. If you're leaned over and just grab the brake, down we go. More times than not, untrained riders, that's what they'll do. They'll never have gotten to the hazard. They'll fall before the hazard because they panic and they overbrake while not releasing the lean. Okay, so you have two choices when it comes to needing to stop quick in a curve. We practice this on the parking lot, of course, by the way. So, this is the one that actually the rider before is kind of practicing this one, where the quickest way to get your bike stopped in the corner is to get out of the lean completely and quickly. Okay? I'm leaned over, I'm like, oh my God. Brake. Okay, now I've separated, I have no tire use being used for cornering, and it can all be available for braking. Okay? But, where am I pointed now? What if there's a big truck here? Right? What if you're actually in the other lane and you did the guardrail, right? So, you can't always do this. More times than not, you end up doing kind of a combination, but this here, where you do the best you can, you brake as hard as you can while you release the lean angle. Hopefully right at the very threshold of where you're able to get as much brake force as you can without skidding out because you're leaned over still. So that's what this is. It's going to take longer, but it's kind of oftentimes it's a more likely scenario. But like I say, sometimes there's a hybrid where you're going in the corner like this and you can kind of straighten it and brake, but you're still in the lean because you don't want to go on the oncoming lane. So it's sort of you just balance it. That comes back to the traction sense I was talking about. Know the load, how much load you've got, and therefore how much traction you've got. You know. This stuff happens like that. You have to train for this. Can you? Yeah, we do it in the parking lot. It's really nothing. You just come around the corner and pretend there's something. Straighten it and brake. Right? Both brakes and emergency brake. I'm going to back up. Is there any questions? I'll move through this pretty quick. Okay. Yes?
Well, nothing pertaining to what we just talked about, the difference. When you're going to go crash, you want to jump off your motorcycle. And you tumble down the road and then you get all banged up. You recommend hanging in there and let the bike take the beating?
I recommend not.
Well,
I teach people how not to crash, not how to crash. So, and I know that's facetious, but the fact is that I don't know. You're on for the ride after. There's a certain point. You're not thinking. There's not really much thinking. I've crashed it like on the racetrack at rather high miles per hour. If you can train to crash.
Oh yeah.
Like athletes, right?
State police.
State police learn
Tuck
how
and
to
roll.
fall. They know how to fall. Like it's a roll kind of thing. And if you do any martial arts or something like that, that's your training, and you can do that. So some people fall. People that don't or have never skied or they've never really done anything very athletic, and they fall, it's just like a brick hitting the ground. But if you've been if you've been kind of athletic at all, just your body has a sense of absorbing that energy. It's kind of a tuck and roll. Yeah.
My ex ended up on a corner.
Yeah.
I don't know how. And he tried to tuck and roll, came over and broke the collarbone. I had to fly to Virginia to drive a truck off this good back to Canada.
So anyhow, that's as much as I can't help you too much with that, except that
What not to do.
like I said before, you train up to here, and then when you need it, it's there. As opposed to if you just aren't, you're working on just your habits and what you've done all along, then you're at risk of ending up having to talk and ask questions like that. You won't now because you're in practice and stuff. Crashing is sort of an uncontrolled thing, but good luck. Hopefully you're well geared. Let's talk about that for a second. Because crashing happens. So if you choose to ride in t-shirts and flip-flops and that sort of thing, that's not managing risk because crashes happen, even to the best of us. It's planned. Anybody wear an airbag vest? You guys will someday because they're actually amazing and they're becoming so much like you don't know they're on. And they're being integrated into the jacket.
Do you recommend them?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wear one on the track and one on the street. Different one. But,
Ever had it go off
I did crashing on the track. Yeah.
with the vest?
Yeah. It was a low side enough that I probably wouldn't have, gotten hurt anyhow. 40 mile per hour is sort of low side. And on the racetrack, and that's another reason for like racetrack riding. It's the safest place to ride. There's no doubt about it. There's no argument with that. There's no car, there's no guardrail.
Probably would have saved my son.
Yeah, so airbags are, they take care of this whole area and they actually support your neck generally. You can get tethered ones, which is what I have on the racetrack. And so that when you separate from the bike, it pulls the CO2. So
What if-
it's physical. The one I use on the street is much more, it's lighter, I barely know it's on. It's it's digital, so it has accelerometers and GPS and all sorts of sensors that it senses when I'm leaving the bike and it goes off in midair.
What do they go for?
So you're looking at $700 right now. They're coming down in price though.
How is it now, the weather?
Sorry?
How is it now, the weather is the best?
Like anything, would I prefer to not have it on? Yeah, but it's pretty good. They've made it out of a material that breathes pretty well. I've never had a problem with it. Yeah.
Is it reusable or is it like an airbag that you won't have to replace?
So some of the airbags, when you get them, you can replace the CO2 cartridge yourself. It takes 5 minutes. The one I have for the street is one that I have to actually send back. It only gets one blow, and then I have to send it back.
So, how does it, like, when does it go off? Does it, like,
Hopefully in time before you fall.
how does it blow off?
So, yeah, that's what I have in my racetrack one, is a tether and a clip, and it's attached to the bike. So a lot of times people will say, well, don't you accidentally set it off when you get off the bike and forget to unclip it? You could, but it's like 45 pounds of pressure. As soon as I feel it tug, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. So, however, I have seen people come back at the racetrack, come back off the track and slip with their foot down, and like the bike falls over, and they roll off, and boom. Shit. But anyhow, that's sort of the thing. It's addressing the fact that if you end up in a crash, we can't control everything. We do what we can, which is what my job is teach you to, or at least make you aware that there's more you can do than what you probably already are doing to make yourself safer. But when shit happens, you really have to be ready for it. Now the airbag vest, like I say, keep your eyes out for them because they really are becoming quite acceptable. And they're being integrated into jackets and stuff. But let's just talk basically, I know it's Connecticut, helmets, your choice, I'm not talking that. But that is the one thing that could really change your life, right, if you don't have it.
I think I tried the two models, the Held and the other.
3 people to me, so it's 3 to 1, and we ride all day up in the Berkshires where I live. I use communicators, so I'm telling you exactly, we talk about, okay, trail breaking, okay. When people are trail breaking, I bring you up to Mount Greylock, and you come down one of those hairpin turns, and when you're still starting to learn about trail breaking, most people overbrake because they're used to the same amount of pressure that they do when they brake, in a short distance. Now you got a longer distance. If you don't release that brake, have lighter pressure, you end up overslowing. So I tell you, I say, okay, next time, lighter on the brakes, right? Next time, it's like hold the brakes longer. So that's the beauty of this. So again, 3 people at a time. I'm only one person. I do have somebody else that I kind of sometimes bring in, but he's still up pretty quick. Besides, I want to go riding. I don't want to do this all day. Although it's a lot of fun, believe me. I'm not complaining. I'm not digging ditches, right?
The Berkshires is a beautiful country.
Sure is. This is the non-sport bike track training. I cannot stress this enough, that this is probably the best training you can do, especially for experienced riders. This is you on your motorcycle on pavement. Forget the whole racetrack thing. Except the
Take
benefit.
off my footboards because I use that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is that if you are out there, especially bikes like this, I want you to touch your floorboards. Why? Why would I want you to do that? In case you have to do it out in the heat of battle. It's like if you're in a corner and suddenly the corner tightens up and you've never leaned past whatever, 30 degrees, the bike will do 35 degrees until it touches. Well, what will you do? You'll go off the road.
You know those little cushions they keep on there, give you warning?
Yeah.
Mine are gone.
Okay. I'm glad to hear it. I really am. Because now you aren't afraid to bring the bike to its capacity so that you will hopefully save yourself in that situation.
That's what you mentioned. What was the gear you needed for that class?
Just full gear. It can be, yep,
Padding, you need padding.
armor. Yeah. So,
Definitely need armor.
yes. So what we are really lenient about this. Like your bike, you ride your bike to the track. The only thing you have to do, as long as your bike's in good condition. I mean, I've had some people show up with rat bikes, and I have to like them too. You're like, I can't let you on the track with a piece of shit. Other people will show up
really
with like,
feel?
you know, that tire, you know, it's marginal. But you're gonna have to basically realize that tire is your friend to you. But we'll let you on the track. So it's literally 98% of the people show up on their bikes the morning of the day.
People crash.
Last 3 events, 0. And the crashes are usually people going off the track, going to the gravel and drop their bike. I've never had the ambulance roll on any of my days. The sporty days are different. Those guys are out there for a different reason. They're willing to push it. That's not what we're out there for. We're out there for training. So to answer your question, it's gear. It's what I consider minimum street gear, but it can be the nylon stuff, you know. It can be leather. That's fine. Chaps don't work because don't protect your ass for one thing, but they also don't have armor. You can wear those over Kevlar jeans that are armored. Sure, Kevlar jeans are fine. This would get pretty minimal, but armored Kevlar jeans, we'll go with that. Your boots have to be full boots. You know, that give you good protection. Some people are coming, you know, those, they're like riding shoes. You're seeing more of those. They're really nice. They're comfortable. They look great. But they really don't provide enough protection. So we haven't banned them yet, but I'm pretty darn close to thinking I don't want it. Because this is for you. Also, the difference between you going off the track, going into the crowd enough that you might need to go to the hospital. So minimum, it's minimum, but it has to be good protective gear. But nothing like race gear, nothing like that. But full armored pants, jacket, gloves have to cover your wrists because I can't have Superman and then all your wrist is exposed. Full helmet, full face helmet can be a flip up, that's fine, but it has to be full face.
Just focusing on tracking it. You say full armor. I got the leather that everybody else is. When you say armor, you mean like the
Elbows,
Elbow,
head,
shoulder.
backpacks.
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah. So, the questions about this? This is something that I said, I have yet to have anybody come to these things and go, that was a waste of $350. They're like, why didn't I do this 10 years earlier? That's what I hear. And I will be back next time. Here's another thing about this. Oftentimes people will say kind of one and done because they learn so much. How much more is there possibly to learn? Well, you come back a second time, you pick up where you left off. And now you're really refining your skills. So, I mean, it's just, we get people, I got a lot of repeat people because they just know there's just always more. Do something through Trancolo, you know, that would be a cool thing. But we do 2 events at the moment, and at Palmer we can do one event clockwise and the other event counterclockwise. So it's 2 different tracks. So we have 3 groups. So there's only 33 people on the track at a time. We separate by, oftentimes by bike type, because we want everybody to be somewhat in the same speed, forming capability. So we'll have this we can use to actually corner at the same speed, but with less leaning, and that involves body position. So usually after lunch, people are like, "Oh, I'm like not touching everything down now. That's awesome, but I'm going just as fast." So that's the sort of thing you're going to deal with.
So
Rebecca.
if I could talk about that for just a minute, when I did the tracking, there's patrol riders out there, and sometimes somebody will pull in front of you and tap the back of their bike, like follow me, follow my line, or somebody will come to you at break and say, I followed you for a few minutes, and this is where I need you to follow me the next session out.
Yeah.
So it is very, you get a lot of people.
Yeah. So Rebecca's done. You've done a couple.
Yeah,
Rebecca's.
great information.
How critical is air pressure in your tires?
So
How much can you be
manufacturers,
underinflated, you still have full?
but it's just you're just not, when you're not in the range that the manufacturer wants it to be in, you're now not in the optimal situation for it to manage the widest condition. So, yeah, your tire pressures are pretty important. Oftentimes people think about tire pressure in regards to tire wear, because it's that's money out of your pocket when you've got 1,000 less miles because you're riding your tires too low. But it's important. But when we assume you're going to have your tire pressure where they need to be. We're not going to go around and check your tire pressures at the track, because we're just going to assume that. We're going to assume a lot of things, that you know how to ride, because you're experienced enough that you ride on the street, and that cornering doesn't freak you out. That generally speaking, you're fine on the road. Your bike is in good condition. We do inspect it, but we're looking at it for like going. Oftentimes it's like, well, your chain is like, your chain is pretty worn. Oh, I didn't know that. Mechanic didn't say anything. Well, we'll point that out, but we'll say it's okay for today, but just take care of it. So it's only obvious things that we're just kind of giving it a cursory sort of look around. There's no leaks. There's nothing, dramatic. By the way, the only thing you do have to do on your bike is either tape over your mirrors or you take them off. We don't want you looking behind you. All that you need to pay attention to is in front of you. Because the passing rider is the one responsible for your car. Your job is just to stay on your line and do your thing. Other questions? This is great. I do a whole thing. Actually, I just did a thing. It's on YouTube. Did a seminar, a Zoom seminar on track days, on this non-sport bike track days. I just posted it 2 days ago.
So when I look for YouTube, how do I find you?
Ken Condon riding in the zone. Can't miss me. I mentioned this. Again, you're not better riders because of all this awesome information you got, if only when you apply it. Okay. This doesn't have to be a big deal. A lot of times people are like, I just want to ride. I do too. You go into any sort of parking lot and you take 4 minutes. You do a couple of emergency braking stops. Do a couple of turns and brakes while you're in turn. Get the hell, go on, go, you're done. You do that every ride, or even every other ride. That's good. That's what you need to do. Right? Do it out on the road. So emergency braking is something that on the street training, I have a place up in Vermont that we go that's straight, like Utah straight for a while. And we do emergency braking from speed. So from 50 miles an hour. Now you get that thing stopped. It's a very, very different feeling than doing it at 20 miles an hour in the parking lot. So find places you can do that. Make sure there's no cars coming either way behind you, of course. So you keep coming. Make sure it's clean. And let her rip. Feel it. See what it feels like. Don't crash and then come to me and say, well, Ken. Any questions? You guys have awesome questions. I think Keith is here. Yeah.
In an emergency situation around the interstate, whatever, I've seen videos of bikes blowing their rear tire. Is there a certain sequence to try to keep from crashing, or?
So, modern tires, you must have really screwed something up to have a blowout nowadays. Seriously. Tires are so good, and they're manufactured in such tolerances that you would have to have a really low pressure, and you would have then had to have ridden it, and you would have had to have busted up the belts.
I was just gonna say, I see quite a few riders out there, where they're in front of you, you can see the belt.
Okay, now I can't help you.
That's rider error.
That's rider error.
That's where you use the braking techniques.
We're following this.
You hope you have that vest on.
So again, I just want to point out, I'm going to answer your question. These are the questions you shouldn't have to ask. Because it's not going to likely happen. Don't focus on something that's unlikely. Focus on the things that you can manage. Where I'm assuming I can tell from you just by looking at you, you are not going to neglect your rear tire or your front tire. So let's just forget. Ask me a better question.
Okay, if your front tire blows out.
Well, now we got.
Ken?
No, to answer your question, if you have a blowout or anything, you know, I mean, again, I mean, it's never, I haven't done anything that's ever happened to me in 50 years of life. So, it's a hard thing. But the thing is, the MSF says, brake with the tire that's not blown out. But again, things like that happen, what are you going to do? It's just going to be
Slow and steady.
probably going to,
Going through the city, somebody might shoot your tire out. You don't
In the wrong city.
Ken?
Any other questions? So I do want to, before you guys pick up, I have a bunch of these books. Writing the Zones is my first book. And then I only have 2 of these because I've sold so many of them last week. And a sticker. These are $30, these are $25. This, a lot of times people ask, well, which one should I get? And I'll ask, well, this is a little bit more of the physical skills. This covers the physical skills, but it also talks more about anecdotes and scenarios. And this is almost a compilation of all the articles I wrote for Motorcycle Consumer News, packaged with good photos and stuff. This is going to give you a lot of the real meat and potatoes. Okay? So.
Ken?
Yes?
Reminder, you still have openings in your class?
Yes, so Brenda arranged to have a parking lot course that is dedicated to the CT event group that is discounted. We're giving you $25 off. Okay, and that is, what's the date on that? So that's something that if you're part of the group, I want you to, you don't have to necessarily be part of the group, but you will after this. You must go through Brenda. I want you to, and she's going to make sure that you sign up. The membership is just, Facebook, just be on the group, right? So, but I do have a discount for that group. So if you're part of that group,
May, yeah.
it's in May, I believe, but it's on the website if anybody. Anyhow.
Oh, no, wait, there's a car show like me.
Okay, so there's that. Thanks, Brenda.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
How much is it?
300, but it's 275 for us.
Usually 300 for the parking lot course, 275 for the special. By the way, one last thing I'll mention is that there's a scholarship available through the BMW MOA Foundation. You do not have to ride a BMW, you do not have to be a member, but you get less of a scholarship if you're not a member. It's all the information's on the website, so, it helps. Training isn't cheap. I got as cheap as I can do it and offer it and make sure I can actually make it worthwhile.
That main parking lot course, where's that at?
Southwood. Yep, just over the border. Track days at Palmer, just over the border, a little bit farther up, by Worcester. And then I do the training up in the Berkshires, up near Deerfield, Greenfield, west. And then I go into the north. For the parking lot, right? Yeah, we talked earlier. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Yeah.
I did one like a 50-60 Do you recommend
Yeah, fine. The type of tire you have, like this is 50-50, like adventure tire. I've ridden knobbies on the track. Not my first choice, but 50-50. They'll wear a little bit more than, they won't be the optimum feel that you have. But you know what it's like on the pavement. It's just maybe a little bit more. That's all. You'll be fine. Any other questions? I think Keith is here, right?
Someone's hungry.
All right. Thank you.